It's 1:30.
Okay, everyone. So welcome to lecture 6. Today's lecture is going to be on deployment. There we go. So a few announcements. PA5 is due tonight at midnight. Just remember to get that in on time. And PA2 and PA3 grades should be coming out soon. PA3 is almost done graded. And then PA4 will be out probably over Thanksgiving break. Make sure to check your assignments. I have been reaching out to some of you who have been getting zeros. Sometimes the zip file is incorrect, etc. Make sure you review your grade, and every time you get a grade, there's a feedback. So sometimes it's just that you missed like your DB file. I saw that for a couple of students, and that's an easy resubmission so that you don't get a zero. So if you want to make sure that you're submitting your assignments correctly, just go into CMS and review the feedback. Make sure that your grade aligns with the work that you did. And your grader's net ID should be at the top of that feedback file, so reach out to them, not myself, if you have questions about your grade. Okay, so a little bit of quick review from last week. So we learned about containerization, which is just packaging code into standardized units of software. And we can then build that code into images, run those images in containers, and then we push those images to Docker Hub. So now let's dive a little bit more into servers. I know we've kind of gone over it before, but we're going to go a little bit more of a deep dive into them. So they're basically a software or hardware device, and they accept and respond to requests made by the client. So you can kind of think of this analogy that we'll be going through the whole lecture as a restaurant kitchen. And the clients, which is the waiters, bring in the orders, and the kitchen, which would be the server, then prepares and sends back the food. And then the key difference here is that all of these requests are made over a network. Okay, so an example of servers. So there's three. There's web servers, and that says email servers, and then identity server. And so a web server, those are probably the ones that you're most familiar with. Every time you open a web page or use a web application, you're interacting with a web server. So they show pages and run apps through web, like the internet. The next one is email server. Those manage sending and receiving emails. And the clients are like desktop apps or web browsers. So whether you're using your Cornell email or like Gmail through your browser, those are all email servers. And then the last one is identity server, which is managing login and security roles. And so an example of this would be logging to Student Center, but making a stop at CU Web login. That right there would be the identity server. So it's just managing the login and security roles. So now a little bit more into servers and networks. So an internet server is assigned an IP address. You can kind of think of that as like a phone number that identifies the server on the network. So the IP address distinguishes the server from others on the network when it connects to a router. And an example would be like 127.0.0.1. That's just a random example. And that's a special IP address that means this computer. And so when your computer connects to a router, the IP address is what makes it unique and findable on the network. So it's kind of like a special code. Okay, so users connect to a server by its domain name. So an example of this would be www.google.com. So we don't actually type in IP addresses to visit websites. That would be like memorizing phone numbers instead of using contact names. You can think of the google.com as like the contact name for the IP. So instead of typing in this long IP address, which would be terrible and strenuous for every time you had to look something up, we use google.com. And those domain names, which would be Google, are translated to IP addresses by a DNS resolver, which means a DNS stands for domain name system. And that kind of acts like a phone book, if we're keeping that analogy, translating the like human-friendly, easy-to-use domain names into IP addresses that computers more easily understand. So remember this little graphic from very early on in the course. This is exactly what we're talking about here. You can see we have IP addresses like 87.25.200.153. And google.com is what we would actually type in, but the computer uses the DNS to then get the specific IP for that domain and IP address. So now we're going to delve a little bit more into actual deployment now that we've talked about and covered servers. So what does our app actually need for deployment? Well, we have a few requirements. One is that it always has to be running. Unlike your laptop that you might shut down at night, an app constantly needs to be running and deployed. It needs to be open to receiving requests. So users might try accessing your app from any time zone, if you think about it. And so it needs to be constantly available for a user to send a request. And it needs to be publicly accessible on the web. Again, that's kind of similar to open receiving requests. Everyone needs to be able to access it. And lastly, the hardware that is managed for us and connected to the cloud. So basically, we need to have one central place where we can access the hardware and control our server. And that would be like the cloud. So give me 1 second to see. Sorry about that. I was just trying to fix the slide so it's a little clearer to see. So renting a server. How do we actually rent a server so that we can host it? Well, instead of buying and maintaining physical servers, which would be very expensive and time consuming, we can rent them out from cloud providers. So you can think of this as kind of like renting an apartment. You get all the benefits, but you don't have to worry about the maintenance, such as like if you bought your own house, for example. So we want to run our application on a server in the cloud, and it will run our containerized software just like we do locally, but it will do it on SOA Cloud, so that's accessible to everyone. And this when we allow the server to be managed by a cloud service, it makes it so that they can now handle like the physical maintenance of it. And the cloud often provides tools to automate security, scaling, crashes, etc. So when we actually rent a server, so these are some examples. So you have Amazon Web Services, DigitalOcean, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. There are some more, but these are like the four main ones. We'll actually be using Google Cloud for PA6 shortly. But DigitalOcean is also very common. And these are just some examples. I believe DigitalOcean is one of the few ones that has a free version if you would like to try it just for your own personal project, but all of these function and work well. So how do we actually access the server? Let's say we get the server to successfully host our application. We need to then be able to access it like in the requirement. We need to be able to see what's going on and control the hardware. So you do that through a secure shell network protocol, otherwise known as an SSH. So it gives users, the SSH gives users a secure way to access a computer, which you can then open and view resources, execute commands, install packages, and update software. It gives you a way into the system, basically. And it's a secure, encrypted way into the server. So this is just a real quick example. You can see at the very top, you have the green SSH, and then you have -I, which is just a flag to indicate that you want to go in. And you have server.pem. That's usually like a secrets file that will give you the authorization that you need to enter the server. So that's like the encrypted part of it. If you don't have the PEM file, which is obviously only given to people who will get access to the server, then you'll never be able to get in. And that's how we access it on Eatery. That's how I did it last semester when I was working on it. You then do appdev at Eatery backend, which would be like the server name that's hosted on cornelappdev.com. So that's how you would actually SSH in. And then once you SSH in, you can see that the terminal at the bottom there actually changes. It's no longer the arrow like your regular terminal. It's now, you see the green says appdev at Eatery because you are now in that server. You have successfully SSH'd in. And now you can see all the information. You can update the software. You can do whatever you'd like. So yeah, so going back to the security, you have to provide username and password credentials when SSH into a server. And there's also public and private key authentication, which we'll get into in next week's lecture. And those are usually done with an encrypted string that is a lot more secure than like a long password. So in actual SSH in action, you have SSH, you have user at server.com. So as you can see here, the user would be AppDev Eatery, because that's the one that we're going into. And then the server is what's after the at, which is basically Eatery Backend AppDev.com. So when you then SSH and you do the command successfully in the terminal, you're then prompted with the server's key and request to connect. And if you have not connected before, it's added to known hosts. This is done automatically so your computer can keep track of which servers you have access to, which ones you have known to be a host. It then gets authenticated via public or private keys or credentials, whichever way you set up the server to be. And if successful, it will open the command prompt like we saw down below with a slightly different as input with a $sign and like the name that you successfully SSH'd into. Okay, so does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, in that case, we're going to keep moving on to now integrating Docker with Google Cloud. In other words, integrating Docker with a cloud provider so that we can actually deploy an app or anything that we need to. So Google Cloud, like I mentioned before on the graphic, there's a bunch, but Google Cloud is one of them, and it's a cloud service that allows you to deploy Docker images easily. And you can then push, build, release all those images to the web, and that's like through the Google Cloud service. It's kind of like having like an IT team managing your deployment process. Again, they're the ones handling all the crashes, things like that. That's all done for you. All that maintenance is done through Google Cloud. So now how do we actually optimize so that we can run all of these things as efficiently as possible? This brings us to clustering. So clustering is a really powerful concept in server management. I'm gonna again, I don't know why these slides got stuck, but there we go. Okay, so a little quick overview. So the whole idea of clustering is that group of servers are connected to behave as one system as a whole. So each server is optimized for a particular purpose so that you can then overall have a better performing system. So going back to the analogy of a kitchen, let's say that like you have one server doing all your tasks for you. That's like having one person clean the dishes, take the order, prepare the food. The point of clustering is so that you can have a group of servers be optimized for a purpose. So it'd be like having a cook specifically for the food, having, I don't know, a cleaner specifically for the dishes. So it's basically taking servers and specializing them for a purpose. So this is a real quick diagram so you can actually visualize what I just talked about. Let's say you have one server that handles web application, file storage, and the database. Again, it's like having one worker handle all the cleaning, all the ordering, etc. That's not very efficient, and it's also more prone to failures, and it's in general not good practice. So clustering would be like this. It's when you have servers, now you have like, you can see server 1 for web application, server 2 for file storage, server 3 for database. Each server is specialized for a specific task, just like having dedicated like cooks and dishwashers in the analogy. So why actually go through this trouble? What are the benefits? Well, it gives us a couple crucial benefits. One, if one server crashes, we have backups ready to go. And that's huge, right? I'm sure you've all dealt with like crashes in apps before, especially if a crash is caused by a particularly nasty bug. It can take a while to get back up. So all of these other servers can act as replacements, and it's just another level of safety. If you had just one server handling everything and that crashed, well, everything is down, right? So that's one big crucial benefit is backups and crash handling, which then relates to data resiliency and application resiliency. Your data and applications are more resilient through these backups. Another benefit is system management. So we can manage our systems more effectively if we know what each server specializes in. So let's say like we need to manage file storage. Well, we know to go directly into server 2, and we know server 2 is going to pertain to file storage. Instead, in this example where we would go into file storage, but then we'd have to dig around that server to see which part specifically applies to file storage, because some of it would apply to web applications, some to database. So specialization helps with also the management of the system itself. And lastly, it helps with scalability and load balancing. So we can scale up when we need to by just adding more servers. And we can also balance the load, which is kind of like balance the work or the effort across servers, which helps for time and just general efficiency. So this is a quick little diagram of like a load balancer working with different web apps. So let's say we have multiple copies of our web app running. We have like web app 1, 2, and 3. The load balancer acts kind of like a traffic cop. So it directs the network traffic to different servers based on which ones are less busy. So again, if you think of load as like the work, a load balancer balances that work, right? So if web app 1 was particularly busy and web app 3, then it would send new incoming work to web app 2. Basically, as a way to balance the work for all the servers or the web apps. So again, network traffic comes in, and then the load balancer can direct the traffic to where it thinks it would best be going. In other words, the most efficient place. You can see there, it can choose like basically whichever web app to go to. And because like these requests get automatically sent to like the least busy one, this means better performance for users. Again, like if a bunch of people are on a server, it will be more laggy for you as well. So it's better for the user as well. There's no like single point of failure because you can transfer everything on different web apps, and greater ability to handle traffic spikes. Again, like if a huge amount of traffic comes in, it's better able to handle and spread out that traffic across web apps so it doesn't cause like a web app, a single one to crash. On top of that, it's a lot easier with the maintenance because we can take servers down for updates without disrupting the total service for users, because we can like say take web app 1 down for maintenance. We still have 2 and 3 ready available for the users, and we can direct them into those web apps. So again, like we get more heavy network traffic, we can then create more copies of our web app and balance it to them. So it's again better for the user. Yeah.
Would each one of those web apps have like file storage, database, and then like the application, or like on the previous slides when it had the 3 branches?
You mean like in this slide right here? It wouldn't be set up like this. It wouldn't be like each web app has its own web application, file storage, and database, because that would be in this example what we proved to be like not as efficient with the clustering. It's more of, let me go here to this example. Like each web app here represents like multiple servers, and so each web app could be used for something specific. So it would be like web app 1 would be, let me go back. Like web app 1 would be like for web application, web app 2 could be like for file storage, etc. And you can see even in here, they're all connected too. So it's like clustering, yes, they specialize, but it's not like they have no connection to the other servers as well. And so it's kind of like this. You can send the traffic to each of the different web apps and they're all connected, but they also use specialists. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So yeah, so that's basically the whole idea of like the load balancing along with the network traffic, and you can keep building copies, keep expanding however much space you have, and it helps to just manage the total efficiency. Yeah. So with that, we're actually done. This one was a pretty short lecture. We're gonna actually save the demo for Wednesday. We're not gonna start it today just because the demo is also not particularly long, and I want to make sure to spend time on it on Wednesday, since I think it's one of, if not the most important topics of this course. So with that, does anyone have any questions before we move to the Kahoot and call this lecture done? No? Okay, if that's the case, let's move on to the Kahoot. So I'm going to pull it up right now.